What is going on, gunfighters? I got a full night's sleep last night and I feel fantastic. You guys probably don't care, but I'm not a morning person. However, my primary breadwinning job, private security contracting, almost always requires me to get up crazy early, which I can't stand. But it's a good job, not complaining, blessed to have it. And last night I got to sleep in, or this morning I got to sleep in, which is fantastic. I feel like I could run into the gates of hell with a water pistol. Anyway, got hopefully what I think is going to be a good show for you guys. Lever gun truck guns. They come in a menagerie of different calibers, different cartridges rather, that'd be the correct term. But, all the way from 22 to 45, 70, and a bunch in between. We're going to talk about that. What would be the philosophy, the use case scenarios for said calibers in a truck gun? If that interests you, stay tuned to the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, ballistics, tactics, truck lever guns, the right way with God Almighty at the center, biblical Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed to serve you as host, military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, competition shooting, hunting, background, bullet points in the show notes. Blessed to be the Lord my rock who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Because the number one thing about me is that I am a servant of God and a follower of Jesus Christ. All right, with that, a couple of caveats here. Number one, I'm not the biggest fan of lever actions. Why am I talking about them? Well, I do have quite a bit of experience. Not quite a bit. I'm not like a state champion cowboy action shooter, but I have a decent amount of experience with lever actions. And it's not all about me. You guys, there's a lot of you just lever lovers out there. You just love levers. And I'm here to serve you guys. Even though it's not what I have as a truck gun, it's maybe what you have as a truck gun. And if it's what you have, I'm here to help. I'm here to serve. That's why I'm here. So I'm not here to tell you that you should get rid of your AR-15 riding in the backseat or your shotgun literally riding shotgun. I'm here to tell you that many people do love the lever gun, and it's what they have, and it's what they're going to carry. And that's why we're talking about it. Now, on that note, the lever action is not the worst thing ever for a truck gun. I'm not saying it can go toe-to-toe with an AR-15 or, a SCAR 7, a SCAR Heavy. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is it's what a lot of people carry. And it has some advantages. I did a whole series on lever guns versus semi-auto and lever gun versus bolt. Did a lot of testing in T&E on that. Even went out and bought a lever gun for those tests. You can check that out. The super scientific prairie dogs per minute calculation. It's settled science. So lever guns, they are somewhere in the middle. They don't have the rate of fire of a semi-auto. They're never going to. They're never going to go toe-to-toe with an AK-47. But they are faster a little bit than a bolt. They are also very plain Jane vanilla. Like the average person, even and I've got a bone to pick here. I'm going to go off on a rabbit hole because I got a lot of sleep and I feel like it. I live in a state where, probably in a lot of states, but a lot of Californians are fleeing California and coming to a state where I live. And they're like, oh, but I'm a conservative Californian. And what that can mean is, oh, I'm okay with you owning a gun as long as it's a revolver in your safe. But, what do you mean you carry a full-size handgun into Walmart, into the bank, into church? Are you some kind of gun nut? No, I'm an American. That's normal to me. But to somebody that considers themselves a conservative Californian, they may think oh, it's cool if you have a revolver in your safe and you bring it to a designated gun range and wait for them to say the line is hot before you shoot, and that's about the only time you can use that gun. To a lot of Californians, that's like a conservative Californian. But even to those folks, wrapping it into today's episode, even to those folks, a lever action does not put them on edge, especially a lever action with wood furniture. They're like, oh, it's a lever action. Now you get into these tactical lever actions, which are what they are. That might be a different story. But your traditional, 30-30 wood lever action or 44 mag lever action, wood furniture, they're not probably going to be as alarmed as if you break out an AK-47. And you could say that that's silly, and I would agree, because the gun itself is not malum and say it's not evil by nature, but that's people's perception. So the lever action has that going for it. It has a decent rate of fire. And they're available in a bunch of different potent calibers, which is what we're going to talk about today. And this idea for an episode came from a Patreon post. If you're not on Patreon, you're missing out on a lot of really cool stuff. There should be a link in the show notes. However, I'm not here to do a big push for Patreon right now. Marlin just came out with a new lever action in 10 millimeter, which kind of had me scratching my head. Maybe we'll get to that in today's episode. But I put out a thing on Patreon and a list. If you had to carry a Marlin, and Marlin makes a good. I like Ruger and I like Marlin, and they make a really good lever action. I'm not saying it's not a good gun; they're very good guns. But Marlin have reintroduced a lot of their lever actions lately, and it doesn't have to be Marlin; just applied to your brand of choice. But of all the calibers, and I didn't put 22 in there, but I started out with 38 Special 357. 44 mag, 44 special, those two calibers, 30-30. I threw in the 10 millimeter because it was new. The 45-70, you could throw in there 45 Colt. I didn't put that in the survey, but which one would you pick? And the winner was 357, and the second place was 30-30, which is what I voted for. Now, let's talk about these. First, it wasn't in the poll, but let's talk about the 22. Now, a lot of people love the 22 for survival. They say if I had to run out in the apocalypse, and fight off, zombie, velociraptor, North Koreans, whatever their thing is in their head, that I'm going to bring a 22 because I can carry all the ammo. And that's a valid thing. That's the big thing. And they are also a little bit quieter. Especially, here's a big advantage of the lever action. You can shoot a lot. Some of them you can shoot 22 shorts, longs, and long rifles. Well, a 22 short or a 22 CB cap should function just fine in your 22 lever, assuming it will feed it. Now, your lever action may or may not like a certain kind of ammo. I have found them to be, lever actions can be finicky. But if it feeds those 22 Calibris or 22 shorts or CB caps, they can be incredibly quiet without a suppressor. And that is something for shooting without making a lot of noise without a suppressor, just having the gun in the back and having that option. They're probably not going to shoot the same point of aim, point of impact as your regular ammo, but, inside of 25 yards or so, it's probably going to be close enough for most things. And if you know the difference, then you could take advantage of that. And the fact that you can carry a lot of ammo is a big deal. Now, I put in the poll, if you had to carry one gun in the back of your truck, if it had to be your truck gun for a year, all your hunting and all your defensive needs as your truck gun. And that's something that I do carry a truck gun. I would encourage you to carry a long gun in your vehicle, even if you carry a handgun, because a handgun is not a long gun. That said, if I were doing this, the 22 would not be in for this. If I was, stuck in the city and the balloon was going up, I wouldn't want a 22 lever action. It'd be better than nothing, but it'd probably be worse than the gun I normally carry. So I wouldn't want that. But it is a decent option, so I'm throwing it out there. There's also some in 22 Magnum. It has some advantages, but you give up more than you gain as far compared to the 22 long rifle, in my opinion. But there is that option. Also, you have the option of 38 Special 357 Magnum. This was the winner. Now, I'm not saying you should, but again, a lot of people do. If you carry a 38 Special or 357 Magnum revolver as your EDC, you have that. You can interchange ammo. Now, to me, this is more of a romantic idea than a practical idea, because even though, yes, theoretically you can do that, the self-defense ammo you should optimize for your EDC gun out of that shorter barrel is not going to be the same ammo that you probably want to shoot out of your rifle, because you're getting, even though it's the same caliber, vastly different velocities, and hollow points, expanding ammo is velocity based. And I think in your defensive handgun you should have good quality, like high quality, modern, expanding hollow point ammunition. And so if you do that, that's probably not the ammo you want to run in your rifle anyway. So it's more of a romantic idea. But it is a thing. I think it's a smaller thing than people make it out to be, but it is a thing, so I'm including it. That may be why a lot of people have it. Also, maybe they just reload for it, and they shoot a lot of it, and they have a lot of it. So there is that. It's better to have a gun with ammo that you have, even if it's suboptimal, than having the best caliber gun with no ammo. So that's a thing. Also, going back to the barrel length, 357 Magnum out of a handgun is a decent handgun caliber. When you put it in a rifle, it's better if you optimize the ammo, but it's still a handgun caliber. But that said, it's potent. It's a potent defensive caliber for defense at moderate ranges inside, let's say 125-ish yards. It'll certainly kill farther than that, but your point-blank range and your holdovers and you remembering all that when you're getting shot at or have been shot, that's a different story. So I would say out to 125-ish yards, it's good for that. You could also load up, and this is going to be true for the other pistol calibers, you could load up real heavy for caliber 38 special, like a 200 grain lead subsonic, and even without a suppressor in a long barrel like that, they can be very quiet, and that has its applications. What else? Except for the 22, it's going to be smaller and lighter than the other calibers we're talking about. At least smaller, maybe not lighter, which we'll get into. But you carry a lot of it, except for the 22, compared to other things. Like, if you're like, I'm bugging out, I got to leave my vehicle because the city's burning down and I'm stuck in gridlock traffic, and if I stay here, I'm going to die, and I got to grab my gun and X amount of rounds. Well, 100 rounds of 45-70 is a lot bigger and heavier than 100 rounds of 357 Magnum, right? So as far as power to weight ratio, except for the 22, it's the winner of that, or the 22 mag, it's the winner of that, especially as far as size and bulk of ammo. So, all right, now let's move on to the 30-30. This is what I picked. I don't know if the ammo is any heavier. It's a bit bigger. I guess it would be a little bit heavier depending. You could probably get heavier 38 special if you went with 180 grain, or 357 Magnum if you were comparing 180 grain, because the bullet's heavier. General 30-30 is going to be 150 grain. The brass is bigger, but it doesn't weigh as much. I'd have to weigh that out, but it'd be pretty close. But it's a proper rifle round. I've said before, I don't know if somebody else has said it before me, but the 30-30 was America's first intermediate rifle round. It is for all intents and purposes a 7.62x39 AK round. But I would say arguably better on the American market because the ammunition is made better, and almost all 30-30 is going to be made for hunting. It's going to be soft point ammo, which is going to make it great for defense, whereas a lot of your 7.62x39 is going to be FMJ, steel-cased, bottom of the barrel stuff. But 30-30 is a good intermediate rifle cartridge, and this is why I picked it. I put in the question, if I had to carry it in the back of the truck for a year and use it for all my truck gun needs, including hunting, well, I live in what I would call like the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana. I was blessed to punch my elk tag this year, and it's a better hunting round, period, for where I live. So that's why I picked it. It's also a rifle round. It's got better range. It's got more power. You might, arguably when you get up to like the 45-70, but that's a lot more power. I think for what I would want it for, the 30-30 is great. That's why it's stuck around for so long, for over 125 years, right? Because it is so good, and it is a very good intermediate rifle cartridge. It is arguably one of the best whitetail cartridges ever made. Fine for mule deer. If you really are judicious on your ammo selection and your distance, elk, it's fine for that. You don't need some brand new 7mm PRC to shoot elk, no matter who tells you do. 30-30 will get it done. And that's why I picked it. So there is that. It's moderate recoil. It's a good round. It's not a 308, and I'm not saying that I think it's the best round for a truck. I'm saying of the lever guns, it's what I would pick. It's got a good power to weight ratio. Just because it is been around so long and it's not as cool doesn't mean it's not a more practical, better choice. That's what I would pick if you said I had to pick right now. Okay, now moving up to the 44 Special 44 Magnum. This is going to be better if you were picking it on the East Coast, I think, and you were doing a lot of hunting with it. 357 Magnum is certainly enough for whitetail deer, but 44 Magnum out of a carbine is better. 44 Magnum out of a carbine gains a bit of velocity. If you use something like a semi-jacketed soft point, it's a very good whitetail round inside its intended range, say the similar 125, 150 yards. It's got a lot more, punch to it. Not that the 357 Magnum can't get it done, but there are certain shot angles and certain shot opportunities that I would ethically take with the 44 that I would not take with the 357. And I like 357. The 44 is more. And it's still a pistol round. And even out of a carbine, it's still a pistol round, but it's more potent than the 357. But you got to carry more bulk, size, and weight of ammo. And if you want to practice with it and have fun with it, which is a big reason I like shooting, it's going to cost more to do that round per round. So compared to the 357. So there's that. But, anywhere from your standard 240 grain up to your 300 and something-ish grain, buffalo bore rounds. It's potent out of a carbine, and it's decent for defense. It would be a decent for defense gun. They can, if it's a light-handy carbine, have a bit of recoil, and not like it's painful or anything, but it's going to be slower to get shot-to-shot recovery time if you're shooting multiple targets than the 357, or even probably than the 30-30, because the mass of the bullet has a lot to do with the recoil, and it's going to have quite a bit more mass than the 30-30. I'd have to shoot those side by side, but I've shot a bit of 44 out of a lever gun, and with a stout load, it can be fairly stout out of a light gun. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, for like hunting, preferable, but for, if you're defense multiple targets, it may not be what you want. 45 Colt, modern hot 45 Colt out of a Marlin or a modern action. Pretty much anything I said about the 44 mag, you could do with a hot loaded 45 Colt. So if that's what you want, get that. If you already are set up for 45 caliber and you're, .452 diameter bullet guy, then rock on everything I said about the 44 Magnum. You could fill in the blank with a 45 Colt. The mighty 45-70. What is it? The only government you can trust is what they say. A 45-70 government. It's been around the longest. It's the oldest on the list. It's still going strong for a long time. Nobody really wanted 45-70 unless you were, black powder silhouette shooting or something. But it's really, people are just drooling over it the last 5 years or so, which is fine. It's a big, heavy round. If you're talking about a bug-out scenario, probably not what you want. It is very flexible if you're a hand loader. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. You could load, solid copper bullets, fairly light for caliber, fairly quick with a surprising amount of performance out of that old cartridge straight wall, and you can load really heavy, 400 and some grain or higher for caliber rounds at a decent velocity out of a modern strong action. That's a lot of power. My argument is probably more power than you need. Now, the one thing you could redeem with this is if it's in a vehicle, there's a good chance you may have to shoot out of your vehicle, like through your vehicle, and or into somebody else's vehicle to stop a vehicle. Vehicle rammings are a thing. 45-70 is arguably one of the better calibers, period, for that. Not just in today's discussion, but a 45-70 to an engine block, that's a decent choice, right? So my general go-to for that is, a 12-gauge slug, deep penetrator slug, but that's not on today's discussion. This arguably, the 45-70 is one of the better calibers for that. So if you're talking about stopping vehicles, 45-70 is pretty good. If you're talking about punching through vehicles, that heavy slug at moderate velocities, that's a good formula for just punching through metal. So, and doing a lot of damage when it does so, and leaving big holes if you're trying to, drain fluids out of vehicles and, get into engine blocks and things like that. It's a good solution for that. But for for deer hunting, it's more than you need. If you live in like coastal brown bear country, you might think, well, that's what primary reason I got my truck on, and then rock on. Not that a 30-30 wouldn't stop a bear, but if you're talking about big Alaskan coastal brown bears, I've lived in coastal Alaska, you may argue that's a better choice for you. But outside of that, it's probably more power than you need out of the stopping a vehicle in the brown bear. And the ammunition is going to be heavier, but it's a powerhouse. And if you're a powerhouse kind of guy, it's a powerhouse kind of option. And let's be honest, I think a lot of the people that are getting levers right now are getting them because they're cool. And the cool guy caliber to have right now is the 45-70. So there is that. And I'm going to talk briefly about the latest. The latest one is the 10 millimeter. This is kind of a head scratcher because to me, 10 millimeter is not a bad caliber. And if you want a potent semi-auto handgun that's manageable to shoot in a full-size handgun, it can be a decent option, and I like the 10 millimeter. However, I scratch my head when I see it in a lever gun. All the other lever gun cartridges we aforementioned, they're all rimmed. There's a reason for that. They do well in a tube magazine. They do well in a lever action. This is not a rimmed cartridge, so I don't know how they're getting it to feed. You could potentially have issues there. I'm not saying it is an issue, but why would you go through the engineering hurdle to do that when you have all these other cartridges? You can argue that, the 10 millimeter is more powerful than a 357 Magnum. It would be a hard argument, but you could make it. You can't make the argument that 10 millimeter is more powerful than the 44 Magnum. So if we already have the 357 and the 44, to what purpose does the 10 millimeter serve in a lever gun? And you could be like, well, I can carry the same ammo, same argument I made earlier for the 357. Well, yeah, but if you're a lever gun guy, is 10 millimeter your cartridge? Like, how many? That seems like a pretty small niche group of dudes where they're like, I love my 10 millimeter semi-auto, but I also, and that's my EDC gun, but I also really love 1870s technology lever actions. Maybe they're out there. Maybe I've just never met one. But if you're a nostalgia lever action dude, you're probably into revolvers and revolver cartridges. So I just kind of scratched my head because a 10 millimeter is a decent round, but it's that because it gives you power in a shootable semi-auto handgun. It doesn't really offer anything that I can see ballistically over a 357 or 44 Magnum. So I don't really get it. If you want it and you're a 10 millimeter dude and you have a bunch of 10 millimeter ammo, my question is, if you take the beauty and the nostalgia and the I want to, John Wayne LARP out of it, wouldn't you be better off with a high point 10 millimeter? It's a straight blowback. It's a much simpler design, and I would say more rugged design than a lever action. Lever actions are very complicated. They work because we've worked out the kinks over 100 years, but they're way more complicated than a straight blowback 10 millimeter semi-auto. And you can get a high point for what, I don't know, it used to be $200 with inflation. What are they, $300 or $400? A new Marlin in 10 millimeter is going to be, the MSRP was like $14.99, right around $1,500. So if you're looking at it practically, if you're going to go 10 millimeter in a carbine for a truck gun, why wouldn't you go with a high point or something else that's semi-auto? Because it's a semi-auto round, designed for semi-autos, getting back to the rimmed cartridge thing. So it's kind of a head-scratcher for me. If you want it and you love 10 millimeter and you just want to blow $1,500 on a lever action 10 millimeter, man, have at it. But 10 millimeter certainly right in the middle. I would put it in the middle, right around, arguably in spitting distance of the 357 Magnum, and a little bit less than 44 Magnum, but it's still a potent cartridge. So there's that. If you wanna go the truck gun route with that. Anyway, guys, with that, I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you do. Oh, one thing. We talked about the not setting people on edge of the lever action. Another big thing is if you do a lot of road trips, and especially like in the Northeast where you're like free state, commie state, free state, commie state, like Massachusetts, ironically, where they started the revolution and having gun rights and having militias. Now they're like, nope, civilians, modern guns, not cool. That place, horrible gun rights. Pennsylvania, awesome gun rights. New York, horrible gun rights. New Hampshire, decent gun rights, good gun rights. Like, if you're living in that, patchwork quilt of free states and infringing states, the lever action is probably 50 state legal. Now, whether you can have it loaded in your vehicle, that may be a thing for your state, but you could at least have it and you could quickly load it. So there is another advantage to the lever action carbine if you live in one of those places and you're not willing to move, or travel through those places and aren't willing to move. So that's the thing. I know I moved to New Hampshire partly for the Free State Project a long time ago, and I was like, well, this is free compared to like Massachusetts, but it's not free compared to Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. Like, what did I do this for? It's like, that's a sliding scale there. But anyway, that's a little part of my history you probably don't care about. Your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical tip of the day. We have a new fresh litter of puppies. They're already all sold, spoken for, but we've been dealing with a lot of puppy pee pads lately, as you might imagine. But the tactical tip is you can use those. They're not very expensive for a giant pack of them. And you can use them for a lot more than just puppy, potty training. You can use those for gun stuff. If you know you're going to make a mess, you're just cleaning a gun that's just filthy and you're going to make a mess, like an AR-15 with all the little parts and all the carbon buildup. You can just lay one of those out and, you just, have a party with your CLP and a scrub brush and just all over the place. And when your brush gets real nasty, you can just wipe it on there and it sucks the moisture, not the moisture, but the oil and stuff out of there. All that stuff's going to be on the pad, hopefully. And when you're done, you can just roll it up and throw it away. So for gun cleaning, really nasty guns. If you're doing a quick clean on your EDC gun, probably not. But if you're doing like a deep clean on a really nasty gun or quite a few guns, just laying out, especially if you live in an apartment or something, just laying one of those out so you can just roll it up and throw it away when you're done. Because, lead, mercury, all that kind of stuff. I'm not a hippie, but you don't want to be eating that stuff. So those puppy training pads can be great for that, even if you don't have Rhodesian Ridgebacks. So anyway, guys, that's your tactical tip of the day, your tactical verse of the day. How about from the book of James? Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect work, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all without hesitation and without reproach. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.